Great. Okay, I'm gonna let people in now. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. The last workshop for today. We have Pooja from Filecoin who's going to give us a presentation on how to integrate Filecoin into your hacks. And without further ado, I'll give the floor to you, Pooja.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Super awesome to be here. I'm really excited to hear about all the great projects you're all going to be working on. I'll do a brief presentation. I think we have an hour actually, so maybe a little bit more than 30 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, and would love to leave lots of time at the end for any questions that you may have if you've already taken a look at Filecoin and have questions about how to integrate it into your project. So a brief introduction to myself. Sorry, let me move the, sorry, one second, I can't see my cursor. I'm gonna move this out of the way. All right, okay, so this workshop is called Intro to Filecoin for Developers. And for those of you who maybe are not familiar with Filecoin as much or don't know me, my name is Pooja and I'm the Filecoin product lead. So today I'm going to cover 5 main segments. I'll do a brief introduction about what Filecoin is, kind of the core features that it has and what that can enable for projects, and some of the core ways in which people use Filecoin for various integrations. I'll then talk about the ecosystem of developer products that exist in Filecoin, give a little bit of developer starting guidance. It's a broad ecosystem. There are lots of different pathways, and so I'll just provide a few starters if you're just getting started. Like how should you start thinking about Filecoin? Some inspiration and examples, and then I'll talk a little bit about how you can get support for your project on Filecoin during this hackathon and also beyond. So first, what is Filecoin? We have lots of definitions of Filecoin out there, but I like this one, which is basically, Filecoin is a decentralized storage network that provides data persistence via decentralized protocol and publicly verifiable storage proofs on a blockchain. There are many different components to this definition. We can dive into any of them that you'd like later on, but Filecoin was really built to accomplish this mission, which is to create a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's information. We really believe that the way that that Filecoin has been built, the fundamental protocol, can be this foundation to store all of the valuable data that exists in the world today. We're really motivated by some statistics that exist in the world. That's something like only 7% of all data that's generated in the world today is actually saved. The remaining 93% of it is thrown away. And we think by building a really efficient marketplace for storage and having the features of decentralization, we can build a marketplace or a storage foundation that can basically save every scrap of data that is created by anyone in the world. And that will be a really wonderful thing for humanity going forward. Some of the core problems that Filecoin seeks to address are, this idea that there are obviously many cloud storage providers that exist in the world, but we've seen how brittle some of these solutions can be. And Filecoin aims to address some of the problems that exist with centralized cloud solutions by building what is essentially a decentralized cloud. Because Filecoin is again, a decentralized network, users have full control over their data. And so some of the problems that we've seen in the past with platforms making choices that aren't necessarily in the best interests of all of their users, and that leading to app death and all sorts of other things, that sort of situation can't really happen on Filecoin, and we've explicitly designed the protocol to prevent problems like that. Filecoin is an efficient storage market. So what this basically means is that we try to allow both sides of the marketplace, the supply side and the demand side, to set prices that are affordable for them, so that anytime anyone is entering into an economic contract on the platform, they're doing so at prices that they find affordable. So that means if you're using Filecoin for storage, there's a whole market of storage providers out there that are offering their storage services at various different prices. You don't have to enter into an economic agreement with anyone that's too expensive or is in a geographic region that's maybe too far away or you don't want to store certain types of data in other countries, things like this. So we allow for greater differentiation in the storage market, and then also efficient pricing, so that people are making sure to pay for storage that they can actually afford. There's one thing here as well, which is that Filecoin's unique construction allows for these storage receipts, essentially. So anytime you store data to the Filecoin network, you are provided with a receipt of the data, which in the form of a storage proof. And this data, this data receipt is stamped into the Filecoin blockchain, and that enables some really interesting use cases around verifiable storage, so that you can actually, give this receipt or this proof of storage to anyone in the world, and they can independently verify that indeed your data was stored in this particular block on the blockchain. And the last one here is optimizing. Okay, I can't minimize the faces. But anyways, I think it's, sorry, let me just fix this. Yeah, so it says to optimize storage. And this is, again, just recognizing that there is a huge, there's a huge amount of storage capacity that exists in the world that is not being utilized. This is just, think about the massive data centers that even the centralized cloud providers, but also, medium-sized data centers that exist throughout the world, most of the time are not operating at capacity. And in addition to that, just people like us, we have on our devices gigabytes and sometimes terabytes of spare capacity that we're not using. And Filecoin aims to optimize this latent storage that exists in the world and provide a market for it. So these are some graphs to kind of support this. So we're seeing also just the rate at which the amount of data we're generating as a society is growing at insane exponential rates. I think there's some crazy stats. It's like the amount of data that we've generated in the last few years is more than we've generated as all of humanity in like the previous 200 years before that or something. So, the rate of data generation is just growing increasingly, really, really quickly. And the amount of storage that we have, if there is idle storage capacity, we want to be able to marry these two trends and just create an efficient marketplace for storage. So that's something that Filecoin really does aim to solve. Great. So I wanted to touch base quickly. Many of you may already be familiar with how Filecoin works, but at a high level, we think of the Filecoin network in this way. There are roughly, two sides of the marketplace. There are clients that want storage. They want to store their data somewhere. And there are miners, which are kind of the supply side of the network, and they provide this storage capacity. And you can kind of think of the Filecoin network or the Filecoin network protocol as the intermediary that manages the interactions between both sides of the marketplace. So the first thing that kind of happens in the system is that when a client decides that they want to store data on the network, they will sort of send their data and also lock up some Filecoin tokens in different protocol actors. And the protocol will sort of, and the clients will have also specified which miners they want to be storing their data with. The protocol will send, say in this case, the client is saying they want to store 3 copies of a particular file. The protocol will send these 3 copies to the chosen miners. And over time, the miners are going to be asked to repeatedly generate these cryptographic proofs to show that they are storing that same file that was originally sent to them correctly over time. And we've developed over the last few years a couple of different bespoke cryptographic proofs. One is called proof of replication. That's performed sort of the first time the data is transferred to the miner. And then there are these ongoing proofs that are called proofs of space-time. And that's basically currently in the protocol, it's every 24 hours. Every miner that's storing a file needs to generate this proof and submit it back to the chain. And as these proofs are submitted, the initial tokens, Filecoin tokens that were locked up in the contract to be distributed to miners over time are distributed sort of like linearly. So in this way, it's kind of like an escrow account. Miners aren't given all of the Filecoin tokens for storing the data up front. They're sort of like paid out over time, over the length of whatever the deal was, like that the Filecoin asked, if the client asked for the miner to be storing data for 6 months, say, these tokens will be distributed gradually over the period of 6 months, so the miner doesn't get all of the money up front. And it's really important, that the clients and miners and just everyone in the system needs to be able to trust the network to actually preserve the data. So there have been, a lot of really interesting research in both, mostly focused on our cryptographic proofs and in our crypto econ mechanisms to make sure that the network as a protocol is extremely trustworthy. And if you're participating in this system, you know that it'll do the right thing. You can generally trust that you're getting what you're paying for as a storage client. And miners also are, being treated honestly, and they're being sort of respected within the structure as well. One interesting thing also to note, which not everyone is immediately familiar with, is maybe many folks are already aware of IPFS. And one of the unique features of the IPFS network and the IPFS protocol is this idea of content addressing. So in the IPFS protocol, data that's stored is not addressed by like where it's stored. It's not location addressed, but rather a unique content identifier, sort of like a fingerprint of the data, is generated every time a new file is added into the system. And that content identifier is what the entire system uses to retrieve data, to refer to data anywhere else. And the same is true in Filecoin. And in fact, IPFS and Filecoin content addressing is the same. It's the same protocol. So some of the core features that are useful for developers to be aware of Filecoin, I've mentioned some of these before, but just to summarize quickly. So one of the core features is that as a developer, you have really granular control over the various parameters of data storage that you might care about. Today, this looks mostly like, you as a developer, if you want to use Filecoin for storage, can choose where exactly you want to be storing your data. So what geographic region the miner is in. You can choose how many copies of the data you want to store. Unlike in centralized cloud services, there may be some default replication factor. With Filecoin, you have complete control over all of these things. You can also choose how long you want the data to be stored on the network, and things like this, and obviously the price as well. So these are some of the different parameters that you can choose today. And over time, we're expecting there to be a much richer market where storage providers are differentiating themselves along a number of other dimensions. So for example, you could imagine storage providers deciding that they want to be GDPR compliant or have HIPAA compliant centers or something like this. And there being secondary markets that crop up where miners can advertise these certifications and ways in which they're differentiating themselves so that clients can then have just like a richer variety of options when it comes to storage, which I think is pretty interesting. Today, we think of storage as pretty commoditized, and it certainly is, and Filecoin it will be as well. But over time, because we're creating this really efficient marketplace, we may see a lot more variety and think of storage as less of a commodity and more of like a differentiated product. Miners may also differentiate themselves on the basis of SLA and things like that too. So it's kind of interesting. The second core feature is this idea of the storage receipts that I mentioned. And I think this is an interesting one because Filecoin sort of just bakes in this idea of fighting misinformation almost. So, I like to think of the use case where, say that you want to store a particular document on the Filecoin network. And when you do, that content identifier is sort of like stamped into the blockchain at a particular block height. And if someone tries to doctor that particular document at some point in the future, you could always ask that person, for the CID, the content identifier for their doctored document, and compare it to the hash that was sort of like stamped into the Filecoin blockchain at block height X. And if the two don't match, you can sort of, let the person, you could basically say, well, this is not legitimate, what you are trying to share with me, because I have proof. I have this like receipt that sort of tells me that this particular file was stored on the Filecoin blockchain at this moment in time. And I think that opens up a number of really interesting use cases as well related to this idea of verifiable storage. I think we're familiar with this already in the context of maybe IPFS and the Ethereum ecosystem. A lot of people are sort of doing similar things with Ethereum. Filecoin sort of bakes this in and exposes a number of other features around it. So the third important, very important thing about Filecoin is, I mentioned before, but obviously as a storage user, you have complete control over the prices that you are willing to pay for storage on the network. The fourth is content addressing. So all data is referenced by content identifiers. And this, in the context of Filecoin, is especially useful when you're trying to prevent broken links to information. So that's not really like a concept that really applies in Filecoin. As long as the data is there, you should be able to retrieve it no matter who has it. And then the last is this idea of data persistence. So one of the problems that Filecoin was built to solve that I did not mention earlier is this idea of data persistence. So, we've had IPFS as a network for a long time, as a peer-to-peer decentralized storage network, but IPFS does not have this notion of data persistence baked in. And so there have been a number of second layer solutions on top of IPFS that have been built to try to counter this problem. But with Filecoin, data persistence is a core component of a Filecoin. So it's like, storage clients will enter into these storage contracts, these deals, and they'll specify how long they want to be storing the data. And over that period of time, the data is not going anywhere. It will, for sure, you are guaranteed, it is a core feature of the protocol that the data will be there for as long as you want it to be stored. And so I wanted to include this here as well, because as a developer, you may be interested in using Filecoin for data storage. That's by far the most common use case. It's really what Filecoin is built for, is as a data storage solution. But there are a couple of other ways that you may choose to build around Filecoin as well. So, in the data storage use case, really what we've seen, given the way that the network currently works, is Filecoin is really suitable for this idea of kind of having like affordable and frequent and versioned backups of the data that's being stored. And this is primarily because Filecoin, I mentioned backups instead of just kind of like the idea of hot storage, because of Filecoin's cryptographic proofs. It's not the hottest storage layer that you could use today. IPFS is a much hotter storage layer. And so if you're using Filecoin alone for data storage, generally developers will use it as a backup layer. But if you pair Filecoin with IPFS or some other sort of caching solution, Filecoin can kind of be considered like the primary data store, and you can use IPFS or something to like retrieve the data as you need it into a hotter caching layer, and then serve it back to the user who's requesting data. So anyway, so there's kind of this use case of using Filecoin for data storage. Another use case as well is using Filecoin for payments. So in addition to being a storage network and a storage protocol, Filecoin is also a cryptocurrency. And it's the medium of exchange for Filecoin storage. So if your application uses Filecoin storage, accepting Filecoin for payments for either that storage or for other services that your application provides is also something that we've seen some applications do. It's like a really good use case as well. And then the third is, all the various like tools and services around Filecoin that make it extremely useful for other developers and other participants in the ecosystem. And we've seen dozens of these over the last few months that are just invaluable. So, it includes developer tools to make it easier for other developers to build their applications. There are network analysis tools like chain explorers and, like chain state databases that will then expose queryable APIs, things like that. There are also wallets and financial tools, and then a lot more. So yeah, those are some of the core use cases. And in addition to being a decentralized storage network, a payment mechanism, and so on, just the technology of what Filecoin is also a rapidly growing ecosystem with thousands of really, really talented people who are working towards this common goal, the mission that I mentioned before, which is to build a robust, decentralized, and efficient foundation for humanity's information. Obviously, Filecoin builds on the incredible IPFS ecosystem, which over the last several years has become kind of the storage solution of choice for many people in the Web3 space. We're working with many, many different projects within IPFS ecosystem today that have also chosen to adopt Filecoin. In addition, there are over 1,500 cumulative OSS contributors who have contributed directly to the protocols or to various projects that have been built around the ecosystem. This is sort of a diagram that we use internally to just kind of map some of the core collaborators around Filecoin. So, it's split between these applications on the network, token infrastructure, developer tooling, collaborators that are mostly kind of on the research and protocol side, many different protocol implementations, and then also infrastructure, so like hosted solutions that make it easy to build your app on Filecoin. Just a brief survey of some of the really awesome programs that we've had around Filecoin in the last few months. I don't know how many folks follow Filecoin that closely, but we're actually about to launch the network. Our mainnet launch is coming up next. It's on October 15th, which I believe is next Thursday. And so, over the last few months, we've seen just an incredible amount of activity around the ecosystem in the lead up to launch. And all of this is kind of around this banner of events that we've been calling Filecoin Ignite. And one of the just incredible events that we had was in collaboration with the ETH Global team, which is throwing this wonderful hackathon, and that was called Hackafest. It's run by ETH Global, and it was 1 month hackathon that occurred in July. There were, I think, something like 470 hackers that participated with more than 130 projects that were ultimately submitted across 50 countries, 19 time zones. There was just a huge number of events. I mean, really, honestly, kudos to the ETH Global team, which is just like incredible at throwing these great hackathons. But yeah, there were some really, really awesome projects that came out of this. I think some may be participating in ETHOnline as well. And if you haven't seen the showcase from Hackafest, there are some really, really inspiring projects there that could be interesting seed and inspiration for your projects as well. Another hackathon that we recently participated in is called Spark Hackathon, which is run by Spark University. And, just similar, like in terms of it's just an incredible event. There were more than 800 participants, 100 teams, 40 universities participated across, all 6 continents, excluding Antarctica, and 30 teams specifically built projects on Filecoin. We've also recently run, it just ended actually, this Gitcoin Apollo program, which was a 6-week mentorship program, kind of an incubator. There were 130 fellows and 50 teams in the program. And this was just a really great event to kind of help projects that have already started and maybe have some traction, take their projects to the next level. And another really, really exciting program called Filecoin Launchpad, which is in partnership with Consensus Tachyon, is starting shortly, may have actually just started. And this is an accelerator program that is for a few teams that receive $80,000 in investment, 3 months of intense mentorship, and a demo day to actually take their, we're ready to see like real businesses being built in this ecosystem too. And so there are lots of opportunities like this that have happened in the past. There will certainly be more in the future. One small example of this also is, we have the Filecoin Developer Grants Program, which is administered by the Filecoin Foundation. We're awarding grants across many different categories of proposals, but to date have awarded something like $600,000 to more than 30 teams. And so we've seen some really, really awesome stuff come out of that as well. This is also, I think we just closed the wave 5, but we run a wave every single quarter. So if you are excited by Filecoin after the end of this hackathon, please definitely take a look at the Developer Grants Program too. And then the last program I'll just quickly mention is what we're calling Filecoin Slingshot. And this is something I personally am spending a lot of time on over the last few weeks, but it's a kind of a really interesting competition structure. It's a collaborative and competitive competition. It's intended for anyone in the world who wants to store valuable data sets and build interesting applications on Filecoin. So actually, if you end up storing data to Filecoin over the next few weeks, you might end up automatically becoming a participant in the Slingshot competition, and that makes you eligible to earn Filecoin rewards. So the general idea is that the entire participant pool will work together to unlock progressively larger prizes. The largest prize pool is 500,000 Filecoin for if we collectively unlock 10 petabytes of data that are being stored to the network. And then participants will will be awarded those funds kind of proportionally according to how much data they've stored onto the network. And so to date, we've seen 200 plus teams on the network. There's almost 100 tebibytes that have been stored and 140,000 storage deals made. So we're running this competition in a few different phases. We're about 10% of the way to having a petabyte stored on the network. So really, really exciting progress. And definitely, if you are interested in participating, please take a look at the website, slingshot.filecoin.io, and it's not too late to register. So you can definitely do that even today. And there will be, as I mentioned, just always more to come. We're really, really excited about this ecosystem, and there are going to be so many awesome programs that come in the future. Okay, so I'm realizing I'm a bit behind time, so I'm going to try to speed through this section. I wanted to give a brief overview of the types of developer products that exist for devs who want to use Filecoin. There are 5 main categories of developer products. There are the core protocol implementations, developer tools that are kind of layers of abstraction on top of the core implementations, various different networks, a few different hosted services, and then this blanket category of sort of other useful tools, which are good for you to be aware of. So starting with the core protocol implementations, there are currently 4 protocol implementations of Filecoin in progress. One is the primary reference implementation is called Lotus. If you've tried to use Filecoin before, this is probably what you've used. It's written in Go. There's also another Go implementation called Go Filecoin, which is maintained by a community team called IPFS Force. The Forest implementation is written in Rust and is maintained by ChainSafe. And Fuhan is our C++ implementation, and it's maintained by the Soramitsu team. So all of these core protocol implementations, they basically implement the Filecoin spec, which can be found at spec.filecoin.io. And Lotus in particular, so this link is a bit outdated, but we have on the Filecoin documentation site, which is docs.filecoin.io, a huge number of docs that explains how to download and set up and configure Lotus. If you're building on top of Lotus, we have a build section that will tell you kind of how to get started with that. So would really recommend that folks take a look at the Filecoin docs if you want to start using the core protocol implementations. And Lotus actually comes with 2 main API clients. So there's kind of the core JSON RPC API. This is if you want to talk directly to a node, and Lotus itself has a couple of different processes. There's kind of like the core node. There's also a mining process, and the mining software can also spawn other processes that are related to it. And the core communication between all these components uses it's like an RPC implementation. And so Lotus exposes this JSON RPC API to developers as well. That's how a lot of, if you're looking to integrate with Lotus at a very low level, we would probably recommend you use that API. But there are also other API clients for Lotus as well. The most fleshed out one is basically a JavaScript API client. But there are a couple of others as well. I believe there's one in Ruby, and I can definitely share links to all these resources with the ETH Global team afterwards, so we can make sure that you can find all of the resources easily. And I just wanted to surface, kind of one common architecture that we've seen when developers are using Lotus for their applications is kind of just, it's informed by the Lotus as a node, even if what you're primarily trying to do today is syncing the chain and sort of making storage deals, managing a wallet, things like that. Lotus is not extremely optimized to be like, there's no concept of light client, we're pre-mainnet launch. And so all of these things will come. But today, running Lotus and staying in sync with the chain requires a pretty hefty machine. So the recommendation that we've been giving to developers is make sure you have at least 32 gigs of RAM, an 8-core CPU, and then 200 plus gigabytes of SSD drive. So that's not accessible to everyone, but if you are interested in using Lotus directly, we'd recommend, having one node that you're sort of hosting yourself. And then every new user of your application, for each new user, you could do something like creating a new Filecoin address for each user, and your application front end could communicate with that node via one of the various API libraries. There are also other libraries like remote signing tools and so on, so that you could allow your users to kind of have control over their address and send funds from their address if they wanted to or whatever, without having to have each of them use a Lotus to run a Lotus node themselves. When we look at developer tools, so given what I just mentioned, if you want like the bare metal, this is real Filecoin, I want to like try all the CLI commands myself, I want to really understand how Filecoin works, I would recommend you take a look at the core protocol implementations. But that's, in a lot of cases, actually not the most, it's maybe not the best pathway if you're really looking to just build a really, really great dApp. And so there are a number of developer tools that I think are really useful to consider if you're looking to build an application on Filecoin. Probably the most popular and kind of most widely used developer tool right now is a tool called Powergate. And it's built by the Textile team. Textile team is really, really awesome. I don't know if they're doing any workshops here, but they have done a number of workshops for some of the other ETH global competitions and hackathons. But Powergate basically, I think there may be, yeah, here. So Powergate is it's its own daemon, but also includes an IPFS node, or it's configured to work with an IPFS node and a Lotus node. So the main idea behind Powergate is you sort of have this like one interface to both the IPFS and Filecoin networks. And this one interface is intended to abstract away a lot of the complexity of interacting with either network. So when you want to store data to Filecoin or to IPFS, you don't have to specify anything like different to work with both networks. You just say, store this CID 3 times, this is how much I want to pay for it. And then kind of Powergate will take care of the rest. There are a couple of different ways in which you can use Powergates. You can either run one yourself, but then that kind of is subject to the same resource considerations that I mentioned before. It does involve running a full IPFS and a full Lotus node. And so you'd end up, having to have kind of that beefy machine in order to stay in sync with the Filecoin chain. But there are also hosted options as well. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But by far, we've seen this be like just an incredibly valuable tool. And the main reason is because you kind of get the benefits of both IPFS and the Filecoin network through one interface, instead of having to deal with like the colder storage and backups just on Lotus, and then kind of the high availability that you would get and faster retrieval that you would get from IPFS. Powergate allows you to have both of those benefits from the various different protocols in one interface. So Powergate is a really awesome solution. I would recommend it to most developers. There are a couple of other really useful tools too. So the Truffle team, which has done just amazing work within the Ethereum ecosystem, is also building a number of tools for IPFS and Filecoin. So Truffle now has a tool that they call Truffle Preserve, which is basically a simple CLI tool that allows you to directly preserve an IPFS, a CID to an IPFS node. It pins your CID, your data to like an IPFS node to have it be persistent, but it can also preserve that same data to Filecoin via Filecoin storage deals. And again, it's really nice because it sort of abstracts away some of the complexity of dealing with Filecoin. And then the other really, really exciting thing that I'm looking forward to seeing in a few months is a Ganache integration for Filecoin, which is basically, if you're familiar with Ganache for Ethereum, it's the same concept for Filecoin. So it'll just basically be a local Filecoin simulator that will allow developers to just in a completely local environment, just develop their applications, see how it would kind of work with Filecoin features, and do so at smaller scale before deploying to live networks. One other really useful developer tool, which is more recent, is called Space Daemon. And this is built by the Fleek team. Fleek, for the last several years, has been a really big part of the IPFS ecosystem. Many people today will use Fleek to deploy their websites to IPFS. And we've actually done that as well, with the Filecoin website. But Fleek is now, the Fleek team is now producing a new product called Space. And the Space daemon unites IPFS and Filecoin, a couple of different decentralized identity solutions and textile APIs all into one daemon. And the idea is that, you as a dApp developer can use the Space daemon and get access to the benefits of all of these different systems united in this one API or one interface, and then essentially use that however you'd like in your different applications. And Space Daemon really wants to be a complete solution for dApp developers. So if it's early days for this project, it's really, really exciting. But if there are features or protocols that you'd like them to integrate that you don't see here already, I'm sure you could reach out to the team and they'd definitely take a good look at it because it's early days still, but has already proven to be really, really useful. Okay, so touching quickly on the various networks. So, obviously Filecoin is a network. And so which networks exist? How do you use them? And so on. So first, in many cases, before you want to deploy your application to a live network, you probably want to test it locally. And so there are a couple of different solutions that we have to run your application locally and kind of simulate operation on a live network without having to use a live network. One is called Lotus DevNet or LocalNet, which is also built by the Textile team. And this basically allows you to use almost all of like the Filecoin features. The only thing it does is just sort of mocks out some of the time-consuming storage proofs that I mentioned before. So it sort of fakes the proofs, and that allows like all of the other functions on the Filecoin network to run super quickly. So that's one really awesome local DevNet solution. Another one is maintained by the Lotus team, and it allows you to just within your Lotus node go through the full set of Filecoin functions, but again, just locally. It doesn't fake out the storage proofs, so you can really get kind of a good sense of how long each of these steps will take as you're interacting with Filecoin. In addition to the local networks, there are a bunch of developer networks that we maintain as well. You can see the latest status of the different networks at network.filecoin.io. And today there are 3 main networks. One is called testnet. And so this is essentially the closest to mainnet conditions type of network that we have. And if you want to do real scale testing of your application, we would recommend that you test it against testnet. There are also a couple of other networks too, called ButterflyNet and NERPANet, which have different parameters respectively. And all of that is kind of detailed on this network's website. And then lastly, the super exciting thing is we're launching mainnet next week. So, starting very, very shortly, there will be a real live network with real live money that you can use once you're ready to like deploy your applications in sort of a production environment, I suppose. So the timing works out really well, I think, for this hackathon. And if you happen to be building on Filecoin, you should definitely join us for a series of events that we're going to be hosting the week after the mainnet launch. It's called Filecoin Liftoff Week. It's October 19th through the 23rd, and there will definitely be some really awesome workshops for Filecoin developers too. Okay, hosted services. So I mentioned before, PowerGate is this product that essentially will allow you to have one interface to interact with both the IPFS and Filecoin networks. We kind of refer to a class of services that does this, but like in a hosted way. We call those Filecoin-backed IPFS pinning services. It's kind of a mouthful, so we shorten it to FPS, which is also not an amazing acronym, but it is what it is. And so the benefit of these FPS solutions is that you get the same benefits as kind of like a PowerGate style solution, except you don't have to actually manage your own nodes. And they'll have other really nice things. Like these FPS solutions are really, really geared towards making sure that the developer experience is as friendly as possible. So they will have the nice performance of offering sub-second retrieval, but they'll also have really nice APIs with just like friendly concepts like standard auth tokens and things like that that you can use to interact with IPFS and Filecoin storage. There are a couple of different FPS solutions that exist today. The Textile folks they have a solution called Textile Hub, which has a storage product called Buckets. which is essentially an FPS. The Pinata team, if you're familiar with them from the IPFS ecosystem, they run a really popular IPFS pinning service, and they're currently integrating Filecoin support as well. And then ChainSafe is another team that's also building a Filecoin-backed IPFS pinning service. And then in addition to that, there are also these hosted PowerGate solutions that are currently mainly provided by the Textile team. There may be other providers of these in the future as well. But again, it's all the benefits of PowerGate without having to host your own nodes, and you get full control over the PowerGate instance. These have been really popular in prior hackathons. I think in HackFest, we saw something like 20 plus teams using hosted PowerGate instances. And so this is just a really great way, I think, I recommend PowerGate to most folks. And I think if you are not interested in maintaining your own nodes at this time, I would recommend hosted PowerGates. Okay, so lots of stuff, lots of information, and just one more thing for you to be aware of is that there are lots of other tools. So those are kind of, I talked about 4 main categories of things that I think all Filecoin devs or people integrating Filecoin should know about. But depending on your use case, you might actually be interested in a number of other libraries and tools. So we have this link is that's listed on this slide includes some of these resources, and it includes things like Docker images and hosted Lotus endpoints, block explorers, chain databases, and other sort of network status and analysis tools, all the different API clients that exist, the various CLI and GUI products that exist as well, all the different wallets and wallet integrations, remote signing libraries, and a lot more. So if this didn't answer your questions, I would recommend looking at this list, because I'm sure there's something somewhere in the Filecoin ecosystem that will make your life a lot easier if you're looking to integrate Filecoin. So starting guidance. I think I'll probably skip this one, but just, high level thing is for those who are just starting out, I would not recommend going straight to using a Lotus node. It's kind of hard to, as I mentioned, requires sort of a beefy machine in order to run and stay in sync with the rest of the network. So if you're just getting started and just looking to experiment with Filecoin, I'd probably look to a solution like PowerGate, either a hosted PowerGate if you don't want to run your own nodes, or just local PowerGate if you're okay with that, or the Textile Hub or any other FPS solutions. I think these are the easiest ways to get started. You get all the benefits of using Filecoin as a decentralized storage network in your application, and you don't have to deal with a lot of the complexity. And these solutions have some really great APIs as well that are very nice. So I would recommend most developers get started by looking at these. So some really quick inspiration and examples of cool things that we've seen in the ecosystem recently. So I mentioned some of the various programs that have been run over the last few months. In that same time, we've been working really closely with more than 80 organizations that are like close collaborators who are building really interesting either applications of Filecoin or important pieces of tooling around Filecoin as well. So just to highlight some of these, this is, again, the same ecosystem diagram. If we take a look at some of the interesting applications and use cases that we've seen, the Fleek team, which I mentioned is building the Space Daemon, is also building this really cool GUI product that they're calling the Space App. And the idea behind this is that they basically want to build a fully decentralized Dropbox solution. So it has like all the really nice UX that we've come to expect from some of these types of products, but it's built on like, fully decentralized stack, including decentralized identity, IPFS, and Filecoin, cares a lot about preserving privacy for users and so on. So this is a really exciting app, and I've used it. It's really, really awesome. There's also, we recently announced, this was recently announced, I think it was last week, Filecoin is getting closer to DeFi. So DeFi plus Filecoin equals DeFil. There are a couple of new products kind of in this space. One is, it's still finding a name for it, but we're working with the Codivite team to provide a solution for collateralized loans for Filecoin, and also a miner marketplace, so that storage clients are able to find miners that meet their requirements a lot more easily and have richer sources of information, like some of the certifications that I mentioned. You can see if a miner it has a GDPR certification or something like this. There are a number of different projects that are using Filecoin for video storage, and one in particular, this project called Voodify, is using PowerGate actually as their storage solution, and it's got a really simple interface. Anyone can upload a video, and it will make it onto the IPFS and Filecoin networks, and uses LivePeer as well for some interesting like transcoding processes. The OB1 Haven product is actually using Filecoin as a payment mechanism. So that's kind of interesting. I think they've open sourced a bunch of that implementation. So if you're interested in using Filecoin for payments, that would be a good one to take a look at. Filecoin Discover is a project that, that we started a few months ago. And the aim with this project was to store as many extremely valuable and like important cultural and scientific data sets on Filecoin. So we've been working with a number of groups over the last several months to get these like massive data sets. I think it's several petabytes worth of data onto the Filecoin network. There's also a project called Slate, which we've been developing over the past few months as well. And Slate is just this really beautiful GUI. It's hosted that you can use to store data to Filecoin. And on top of that, you can build these really cool slates, which are kind of like public boards that you can use to organize some of your photos. It could be like a personal photo album. It could be just like a mood board of some sort. And you could organize all sorts of documents like PDFs and images and videos and share it with anyone in the world. And again, this project is also using Filecoin for storage. Some of the developer tooling that's being built by close collaborators, we've already talked about PowerGate and Truffle. There's also this recent collaboration to with the Polkadot team essentially, and we're working to create a unified API between these two projects. So look for that coming soon. And also this a recent announcement from the Ethereum Classic Labs team to add support, OpenRPC support for Filecoin Lotus. And there's also Protoschool, which is just, Protoschool has been in the Protocol Labs ecosystem for a really long time, has had a lot of really great tutorials about IPFS and IPLD, and now also has these really wonderful tutorials on Filecoin. So that's just proto.school, and there are a number of courses that help clarify tricky Filecoin concepts like verified storage and CIDs and other things. And then really quickly through token infrastructure. So as of today, we do have Filecoin support on Ledger. There are also self-hosted web wallet solutions like Glyph. MetaMask support is in the works and should be available very soon. Same with Trust Wallet. And we've also been working with a number of custody partners, and Gemini, Anchorage, and others have announced that they will be supporting Filecoin at launch. And then I wanted to kind of like close this section with just a quick question, what are you looking to build? And you may already have lots of ideas around this, but in case you're looking for some inspiration, for HackFS, we created this list of kind of, I don't think it's actually 100, but many dozens of hackathon ideas. There's also, for the Slingshot competition, a number of really awesome data sets that we'd love to see stored to the Filecoin network. Some ideas of, generally Filecoin is great it's kind of the perfect ideal solution for storing like user data for Web3 applications. Data marketplaces are an interesting application we'd love to see as well. Using Filecoin for its feature of like data authenticity, fighting misinformation, using Filecoin for verified storage, building smart contracts over very large data sets, using Filecoin for video publishing and distribution. Yeah, this is, we love games and just really cool assets. And so storing virtual world data on Filecoin as well. And actually using Filecoin as a game distribution platform, or even just for actually just storing games on the network, distributing packages and containers as well. And so during this hackathon, there are a bunch of different resources that you can use to get support from the Filecoin team and just learn more about how to perform your integration. In addition to the Discord channels that you have for this hackathon, The Filecoin community also has a really active Filecoin Slack workspace. It's accessible at filecoin.io/Slack. That's how you can sign up for an account. We spend a lot of time here, so if you're not getting a response for us anywhere else, this is where you can definitely find like all of the members of the team. There's the Filecoin spec, which I mentioned before, if you're looking for a good technical deep dive into Filecoin. The Filecoin documentation site, Filecoin proto school tutorials, and then again, over the last few months, we've had some really, really awesome events that have generated just really good resources for developers. So one of these was the IPFS Pitting Summit, which happened earlier this year, and there are some really great talks on Filecoin as well. We have a number of Filecoin masterclasses that cover various topics that are interesting or useful for developers, including introductions to Powergate and other textile technologies. From HackFS, there were a number of just really, really awesome workshops, including several that were focused on Filecoin. These are some of the HackFS workshops that were relevant to Filecoin. And then as part of the Slingshot competition as well, which is ongoing, there are some really awesome events and workshops here too that I think would be great for folks to take a look at. And that's it. This was me talking for a very, very long time. I will stop sharing. And if any folks have questions, we have about 10 minutes. So happy to chat about anything.
Hey, Pooja, thank you so much. I see we have some questions here in the chat from Light Client. How will Filecoin hosted sites be able to compete with AWS, Cloudflare, etc.? If I'm building a consumer product, I want very low latency, and so I'll distribute my data to CDNs around the world. Is this possible? How do I know that Filecoin nodes hosting my data have the latency and bandwidth to provide my users with high quality service?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So basically today, as I maybe skimmed over it, but today the performance of Filecoin on its own it's better for kind of like a backup solution. We don't generally recommend that it's used as like the primary solution unless what you're trying to do is like backing up or archiving data for long-term storage. And that's, again, just because of the cryptographic proofs that we've had to use in order to have high security in the protocol. That's the reason it's like that. So in most cases, if you're trying to use Filecoin for hosting a site or a website or something, we'd probably recommend that you use Filecoin in conjunction with IPFS through one of these products like Powergate or Textile Buckets or something like that. And then in that case, you can sort of expect the same type of performance that you would see if you were just using IPFS alone. I'm not sure if that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, is this a direction that Filecoin is like interested in going? Because I know that a lot of people have been excited about IPFS for a long time, that they can, deploy a website in this like decentralized manner. But just like you said, IPFS and Filecoin on their own without these layers on top of it that provide those sort of CDN services, it's not going to provide the same sort of a service that consumers are used to today. But is this something that Filecoin in the future wants to integrate more back into its like L1 protocol, or is it something that will always be services on top?
No, 100%. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's definitely. So it's always been the intention for there to be, today we focus a lot on sort of the storage market component of Filecoin, but the intention has always been for there to be a retrieval market as well. And you can think of that as kind of the intended CDN layer, because where we may see like the storage market, the miners on the storage miners basically, they are in many cases like data centers or like just large, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is data centers, less like individuals, but they may be locating their centers in places that are like in more rural locations or areas where it's like a little bit cheaper to operate large data centers. But the idea behind the retrieval market is that you could imagine literally anyone in the world, and especially like people in cities who may decide that they want to like run a retrieval client program like in the background of their computers. They're sort of caching frequently requested data off the network and then serving it to other people who are requesting it from Filecoin. And so if you imagine that, like it's almost like anyone could be an edge distributor of content. And that's definitely the direction that Filecoin is planning to go in very, very shortly. It's not very robust for mainnet, but there are some kind of MVP solutions for what that retrieval layer could look like that exists today. But yeah, but it's not super fleshed out right now. But I think within a few months, we should see it start to have really, really good CDN-like capabilities as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
We've got one from Stefan. Stefan, if you want to just jump in and unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask Pooja your question.
Yes, absolutely. It's a little bit late here in Germany, but I'll do. So there are some colleagues of mine who are currently running a custom IPFS cluster, and I'm always telling them, people, you know what, these Filecoin people are running mainnet within a week or something. Would you recommend, if you are about to run a productive application, would you recommend to go all in Filecoin now, or would you still go the IPFS cluster way and pin things locally?
Good question. Yeah. So I think today, again, it depends on the use case, but I think realistically, if you're looking for like fast retrieval of data, Filecoin alone is not going to be a good solution for that. One important thing to note is that I've been talking about like our cryptographic proofs as being like the reason for the performance that we're seeing today. We have basically completely implemented like a new type of proof of replication, which we're going to be upgrading to at some point in the next few months. And that should basically make the like retrieval performance for Filecoin comparable to IPFS. So it's something that we're like definitely working towards. Know that it's an important thing for Filecoin to have fast retrieval as an option, but today it does not. So, you know, if you're, I think that's why just knowing that this is coming like down the road on Filecoin, I think these like hybrid solutions that use IPFS and Filecoin today are really, really great because then it allows you to already have done the work to like understand Filecoin, start storing your data to that network. And then once like the faster retrieval becomes available on Filecoin, you can start to use that feature from the network too. And it never hurts to like also have it sort of like redundantly stored in IPFS. But once the retrieval capabilities are there, maybe you could start to like pin less data to your own cluster or things like that. So that maybe saves on some of the storage costs there. But yeah, so I think probably today, I would say if you just want to use one, probably still stay with IPFS cluster. If you are open to like skating a little bit to where the puck is going, maybe starting to invest in some of these like hybrid solutions would be the way to go.
Pretty much my idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see a question from Leandro. Leandro, we do have the YouTube video streaming now, and it will be posted later, if that's your question. Great. Awesome.
I had another quick question.
Go for it.
Okay. I was curious, like, what sort of guarantees do we have for saving information onto Filecoin? Like, do I know I'm going to be able to get this data back? If I can't get it back at some point in the future, what happens to the person who's supposed to be holding that data?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this is like a core thing in Filecoin is just like, how do you actually trust this thing? It's a really hard question. We've invested a lot of time, years, honestly, in solving it. And so there's basically, if you're like storing your data with someone and at some point it just, you can't get it back, either you directly can trigger like slashing that miner, or the network will do it like when it's kind of automatically going through its repeated challenges to get proofs of spacetime back from the miner. So if the miner cannot like produce the proof of spacetime when they're being challenged, they will their storage will be considered in a faulted state. And if that state persists like for some period of time, then if essentially that sector gets terminated, the protocol recognizes that they're maybe not behaving honestly, because sometimes like that, you know, the outage will happen. It's just an operational failure. It's not really like the person behaving maliciously. And so after some period of time, that storage will be considered terminated, and the person will lose like all of their, they have to put collateral up in order to be able to accept storage deals on the network, and they'll lose all of that collateral. And it's a huge financial loss. And so there's some like really strong economic incentives for them to like keep the data online.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but if you like try to retrieve something and you can't get it back, you can like slash the miner basically. And then there's also like deal collateral as well that you would get as like compensation for that.
I see. So have you guys like also thought about what some sort of like worldwide catastrophe would mean for Filecoin? Because I think this is something that's really interesting about ETH2, and like we saw in the Badasha testnet about how there was this catastrophic error with the time servers for the Prism nodes, and the network was able to come back to a stable status within a handful of days. For Filecoin, like what would that mean if one continent was knocked offline?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't personally know. I know we have definitely thought about those sorts of scenarios. I'm not sure the extent to which. I think if so as long as there are like nodes on the network that are like able to maintain consensus with each other, even if it's a very small number of nodes, and if everyone else is offline, or because there's like some catastrophic event, the chain would be able to progress and the network would still live, but it wouldn't really be able to do anything useful if all of like the people who are providing storage are just like, something happens and they're no longer online. So in a case like that, there would be like severe financial loss for the people who kind of go offline after some period of time, like I was just saying. But then the network would sort of just like continue. But yeah, if every single node was wiped out, I think it would
probably have bigger problems.
Yeah,
that were to
exactly. Yep.
Cool. Unless there's any more questions. Oh, we had one from YouTube, which I meant to ask earlier. Apologies. The question was, if my website is hosted on IPFS, why would I choose Filecoin in case I need a database? They add, I can't use IPFS to store the data. The data? Sorry, trying to get the intonation right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so I think if your website is already hosted to IPFS, then really what Filecoin would provide additionally is just like having this like backup that's on a truly decentralized network. In most cases, when you're like using IPFS, if you are not maintaining like a cluster of nodes yourself, like we were just talking about or something, you're probably maybe using like a centralized pinning service, and most of those are like hosted in a cloud provider like AWS. And so really like Filecoin is just a way today to like do these, it's a fundamentally decentralized network. And so if you wanted to like back up your storage to a decentralized network, that would be the benefit of that. And you may get it for free, actually, like a number of like popular IPFS hosting solutions as well, like Fleek and others are also like integrating Filecoin for just storage to like snapshot websites to Filecoin and preserve them there. So if you're using one of those providers like that, you may just kind of get that for free at some point in the near future.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Pooja. This has been great.
Thank you.
Really exciting stuff. And congrats on the launch, on the upcoming launch. Very exciting.
Thank you. Yes. Wish us luck. It'll be definitely exciting.
It's going to be great. It's going to be the ride of your life. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. And if you have questions, yeah, definitely feel free to, I'm on the Discord. Is that the right place, Heather, for support?
Yeah, that's the best place. And failing that, your Slack, which you mentioned earlier.
Perfect. Awesome.
Cool.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
Thanks, Pooja.
Thanks.